Hello, Internet. Mark from the Game Vault Podcast here, and here are the Game Vault Pod's top games of 2023. You will hear 10 through 1 of my list, 5 through 1 of Tom's list, and 3, 2, and 1 of Jen's list. Hope you enjoy. Without further ado, let's start with number 10. Resident Evil 4 Remake. After the success of the previous 3 remakes, Resident Evil 4 was probably the most asked for of the remaining entries. There is said to be a split in the Resident Evil fanbase in regards to which is the best one, and it really comes down to when you first got on board. I fall into the RE2 camp, but understand that RE4 is far and away the most well-known and most approachable of the series. The remake does the impossible and improves on an almost perfect game. The combat is satisfying, and the slight changes in the story make things a bit more believable than the original. Well, as believable as a Resident Evil story can get. There isn't much to dislike here. Its placement says more about the games above it than RE4 itself. Even though it is the 10th game on this list, I still highly recommend playing it, especially if you've had any interest in Resident Evil games in the past. While you do that, I will just sit here and patiently wait for my Code Veronica remake with the same hope and belief as I do for Wind Waker on Switch. Number 9, Goodbye Volcano High. Every year there is a game on this list that is certifiably a mark game. Goodbye Volcano High is that game for 2023. Ever since the first trailer, I have followed along with this game's release schedule and was concerned for a while that it may have been cancelled. Thankfully it was not, and the game mostly was what I was expecting. Goodbye Volcano High is a visual novel with a surprise rhythm game built in. You follow along with Fang, a non-binary dino teen, in their senior year of high school. They are solely focused on winning the Battle of the Bands and playing the local music event called Aerofest. Throughout the game, your choices decide where their relationships go and how successful they are in keeping everything together. The story's main hook is that this year may be when the asteroid hits Earth and wipes out the dinosaurs. This event hangs over the entire game and adds a layer of tension to the lives of our dino team. If it wasn't for a certain moment in a game higher up on this list, the acoustic song near the end of the game during a blackout would have been my favorite moment. A beautiful job by Canadian musician Common Holly, who provided Fang's singing voice and brought great emotion to that scene. Now this game may not be for everyone, as most visual novels are, but the game did not disappoint me, and that alone made it worthy of making this list. Number 8, Starfield. If you told me a year ago that Starfield wouldn't have cracked my top 5, I would have thought it was because the game was broken and a huge disappointment. While it was a slight disappointment, its inability to make me care about its world and characters was much more of a factor than how the game shipped. As much as I love to create headcanon within most Bethesda games, it is usually based on something from within the game itself and not something I need to make up from scratch. The closest I got before I stopped caring about even that was creating a character who looked like Haley Williams from Paramore and named our spaceship The Misery Business. Everything else in the game just felt like going through the motion, and I did not even bother with the base building, even though it was one of my favorite parts of Fallout 4. The world is beautiful and feels lived in, but there is not a lot of incentive to visit locations after completing the part of the main quest that takes you to those specific places. A lot of the side quests take place on the same 4 or 5 maps, located either in a cave or on a base. As much as I was hoping they could do it, Bethesda Game Studios and Todd Howard were unable to solve the big problem with open world games set in space, keeping it from getting boring. Which is a shame, but I probably should have expected it. Starfield is the most 7 out of 10 game that I've played in years. Number 7, Super Mario RPG Remake. For a lot of gamers my age, Super Mario RPG, The Legend of the Seven Stars, was the first role-playing game that they were able to wrap their minds around and actually complete on their own. The remake keeps all of those baby's first RPG elements and makes only small changes to help it feel fresh. The story and journey are completely unchanged, but the addition of a fast travel system is one of the many quality of life elements that make the game flow better. The biggest new addition in combat, the combo meter, which awards those who are skilled enough to master the timed hit and blocks that the game is known for. Super Mario RPG is one of the few games that can be enjoyed by both someone new to video games and those who have been around since the beginning. This is one of those rare remakes that does the bare minimum in terms of story and still makes it worth another purchase and playthrough. Number 6,
Final Fantasy XVI. If you watched me stream this game on our Twitch channel, then you may be surprised to see this outside of the top 5. My playthrough was enjoyable, fun, and surprising, as I was not expecting much from this game when it was in. Final Fantasy XVI benefited greatly from its demo. Instead of being just a vertical slice of a section of the game, Square Enix made the first 2 hours of the game playable, along with a portion later in the game, just to change up the combat so you can see all the game had to offer. Unlike Starfield, Final Fantasy XVI was able to make me find a connection to the characters, which made me actually care about the outcome of the story, and led me to even get emotional on stream at the end of the game. And without that demo, I would have not experienced that. The combat was a step up from Final Fantasy XV, but not to the level of Final Fantasy VII Remake. Encounters were challenging, but not too stressful, even on the baby mode that I played on to get through stream. Overall, the game was the victim of the amount of great games released this year, and that is why it falls short of the top 5. Number 5, Baldur's Gate. There's something to be said for a game that can account for just about every choice a player can. I'm not talking about the macro level of a Telltale game of so-and-so will remember that, but even the smallest choices that you would never think a developer would pay attention to, Baldur's Gate 3 does. My favorite example is that there's a reaction to just about anything you do, including killing one of the main party members and reviving them before you even talk to them. Something that probably would not come into the mind of 75% of the gamers. They don't just brush off the incident, but have a natural reaction, and depending who it is, they will hold it against the player for the rest of the game. Baldur's Gate 3 is a great achievement and one I was not expecting to enjoy much as I did. The integration of D&D 5th edition made most of the combat and level up options easy for me to understand, especially as someone who has played 5th edition for a while now. It was nice to have a bit of a heads up on how I would like to upgrade and shape each character. As for the gameplay itself, most of the content takes place in the first act. Then the game loses a bit of its momentum in Acts 2 and 3, but never enough to make me bounce off. A great achievement this day and age, especially in 2023. The one piece of advice I will give you is to get the spell Speak with Animals on one of your characters as soon as possible. You won't regret it.
Number 5 this year goes to Forza Motorsport. The first Forza Motorsport for the next-gen consoles absolutely delivered on visual. This game has seen mixed reviews this year, but the streamlined gameplay has certainly helped this dad gamer for quick gaming pit stops. A great handling and physics model had me coming back to this one again and again.
Number 4, The Legend of Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom. I know what you guys are thinking out there. Huh? Zelda? Not in the top 2? Yes. My most anticipated gaming years was unable to even crack my top 3, let alone top 2. As I mentioned earlier, I needed to settle on a list for this video, and this was how I felt the day I recorded this video. I spent more than 100 hours in Hyrule, and almost mapped out the entire world, but I still didn't feel the same excitement as I did in the Wild. And that is why this wasn't my clear-cut number. The story and combat is better than Breath of the Wild in my opinion, but for some reason, it didn't capture my attention as much as those games above it. The building mechanic was fun, but I don't think I'm creative enough or have the engineering chops to get the full experience that the devs expected. I actually feel bad that I didn't like this game as much as I wanted to, and that level of high expectation probably what lowered the game's position. It has one of my favorite moments of the year, and even that couldn't elevate it. I will probably play this game in 2024, but not with the same enthusiasm as I thought I would. It is definitely an it's me, not you situation with Tears of the Kingdom.
Number 4 for me was Hi-Fi Rush, a true surprise with an excellent gameplay hook. I haven't truly picked up a rhythm game since the fiery end of the Guitar Hero franchise. This game matched tight controls with a stellar soundtrack and a fun story to give a great action-adventure package.
Number 3, Sea of Stars. Every year, there is a game I play on a whim because of word of mouth, one review I saw, just a screenshot, and this year, that game was Sea of Stars. This throwback to 16-bit turn-based RPG does the almost impossible feat of blending a bunch of features from famous JRPGs of that era and have it work almost seamlessly. Combo attacks like Chrono Trigger, timed and hit blocks like Super Mario RPG, weakness-based lock systems as some of the Final Fantasies had, and especially specific jobs for each character. All of this combined to make one hell of a fun time. The story was a better version of your typical JRPG of that time period, even if it doesn't stick the landing. This game is better played than told. So, if you have Xbox Game Pass, I highly recommend checking this out, even if you don't have nostalgia for SNES RPG. Even a vague interest in JRPG should be enough to enjoy this game. I just wish the ending was better, and I was not forced to get the perfect ending to see the whole.
Number 3 is a smaller game that came out this year that Mark wanted me to play in the worst way. Well, he was right. Sea of Stars is almost my perfect game. An old-school turn-based RPG with a polished battle system and a killer soundtrack speaks to me in the most nostalgic of. My only slight letdown was the story, but the cast of eclectic characters kept me in it for the long haul. If you have Game Pass, do yourself a favor and download it now.
My third pick is Lethal Company. I've logged about 24 hours into this game so far. And this is a pretty new game for 2023. I believe it came out in November of 2023, if I'm not mistaken. But this game literally came out of nowhere for me. It was actually one of the games that all of a sudden all of my fellow horror streamers were playing. So I figured I'd probably like it as well. And I was definitely right. Overall, it's very simple in its premise, which makes it really easy for new players to pick up and understand. Once you start playing, you do realize there is a complicated side to the game because you have to have a fair bit of strategy in mind in order to do well. So basically, you're hired by the company, which doesn't have a name other than the company, and they hire you to be a scrapper for them. So you travel to different moons and you collect junk that in turn they buy from you. And they provide you with a quota that you need to hit over 3 days. So every 3 days, you gather up all the junk that you collect, you go to the company, you sell it. If you hit your quota, they'll hire you for another 3 days, and so on. The catch here is that there are monsters lurking around the moons, both inside these very backroom-esque looking facilities, and also outside in these various types of wildernesses, depending on the moon that you're on. So you have to learn what the monsters' strengths and weaknesses are, what their abilities are, as well as when you need to maybe give up a little early on a mission to avoid dying, because if you die, you lose all your scrap. So overall, this game is really fun with friends. I'm not a huge fan of playing solo because it's really easy to die, and then when you die, like I said, you lose all your stuff immediately. So it's hard to hit quota if you die playing solo, but overall, I love how unassumingly creepy this game is. You know, at first glance, it might not look that creepy, but I've gotten plenty of jump scares from the different monsters and a lot of laughs from playing with friends, so I definitely recommend this to pretty much anyone that loves horror games.
Number 2 is Hi-Fi Rush. This was a game that basically came out of Shadow dropped back in, I believe, March, and I decided to make it one of the first games that I ever streamed in full on the channel. That was a new. Had a ton of fun with the chat. Game was great. My favorite part of the game, figuring out that playing through the OBS preview window made me really good at the game, but I am terrible when playing it on an actual television. Controls are great. The rhythm part is something I really learned quickly and succeed with despite having a lot of lag. Characters are fantastic. Probably 2 of my favorite characters a year in Peppermint and Cinnamon. Corsica, good honorable mention, but all the characters in general are just great. And I think it more so is the surprise of the game that led me to like everything about it. Sure, really fun time. I really hope everybody gives it a shot. It's still in Game Pass, so some of the licensed songs are great. But if you want to stream it and have a channel, there is a streamer mode that the songs are. I wish more companies did this and Shadow dropped this quality.
Number 2 was an interesting one for me. Final Fantasy XVI was everything I didn't want in a Final Fantasy on paper. Dark, Game of Thrones style world with an action combat system. I was very skeptical until I played the demo. Valisthea sucked me in immediately and did not let go until the story was complete. Another stellar soundtrack and intriguing characters kept me engaged from start to finish. Say what you will about the pacing, but this game is the only one besides number 1 that made me go out of my way to pick up a controller anytime I could.
So for my second pick, I am going with Sons of the Forest. Overall, this was a really great game that I played this year, and I've logged about 36 hours into it so far. I had never played The Forest, which was the first game, but even though I wasn't caught up on the story, Sons of the Forest was awesome. It combined two of my favorite gaming elements, horror and open world survival. It was fun to play alone as well as with friends, and I found it to be challenging but also easy to pick up and play as someone who was very new to the game. The story was really good too, and I did cheat a little bit. I did look up the story from the forest, so I wasn't totally lost on the ending. But overall, very fun, and that's why I wanted to mention that for my runner-up as Game of the Year.
Number 1 is Alan Wake 2. My God, what a game this was. Even though the first one, beat and control, and sort of know what Remedy does, nothing could have prepared me for the things I experienced. Pepe Sylvia type red string connection of things that you find in this game, connecting all of the Remedy. The two of them, they do not technically in Max Payne and Quantum Break. What a job, Sam Lake, in terms of fully engrossed story, but also didn't make it punishing. Haven't played the Saga Anderson character for that. She comes in, nothing, and you sort of learn everything with her for the first couple chapters before you are eventually to the dark place with Alan. And those first couple chapters with Alan are just chef's kiss, those of us that have played through this game and those of us that love this that is Remedy. It has probably my favorite moment of the year. In terms of We Sing chapter, where they basically a musical theater retelling the first Alan Wake game, and it just sort of comes out of nowhere, and I'm really glad that I didn't spoil myself seeing the performance. It is spectacular, is why Remedy is the best in the business when it comes to little out of left field moments. After that, Alan's stuff just more and more the dark place, and Saga's stuff gets a little more like in your head, but like is who's telling the truth, which side do you believe, is it what everyone else is saying, is it what Saga believes, and just all of that stuff is perfectly played out. Voice acting is tremendous, and it is just one of those games that will come up if I ever a top 25 game all time or like that. This is really that good, and it is the first time they've had some kind of DLC, New Game Plus thing, that I actually finished, and they added so much content. You get what is true ending in game. But in this case, you just play it through and easy. You didn't have to go get all the collectibles and 100 or any of that bullshit stars made to get the true ending. This is just simply play through the game again. You can play it on baby mode, just rush through the main and get all the things. The way they made Connection Control in the final draft here was perfect. I truly cannot Control 2 or Alan Wake 3, whichever one they decide to go with next. But there is a lot of meat on this bone to tell. Remedy's one of the best. If you have not played Alan Wake, I highly recommend checking it out. If you've never played any of the other Remedy before, or if you just want to enjoy content with somebody that has actually played through the game, there are boatloads of streamers out there that have done a great job playing through it. Just to name a few, you have Jesse Cox, you have Co Carnage. They did a really good job of having his leading the audience. But yeah, this is a special, special game, and it was one of the easiest games that I've ever had to give out, and I am sure it is showing on many lists.
Number 1. What can I say about Super Mario Wonder? What a weird, hallucinogen-filled fever dream of a Super Mario game. It's hard to iterate on the old standard of Super Mario, but here we are 38 years later, and Nintendo finds a way to do it. This was a truly beautiful game, and the Flower Kingdom was a great new setting. The new power-ups were always a treat to try out and figure out the best way through a level. The Wonder Flowers added such an interesting element to each level, making them a treat to complete multiple. Super Mario Wonder delivered yet again when I didn't think it was possible.
All right, so my game of the year is Demonologist, which is a paranormal indie horror game. I know, very surprising that I would pick a game like that. So Demonologist quickly became my favorite paranormal game of the year. Basically, when I realized how different it was from Phasmo in so many ways, and it was literally like a breath of fresh air in that department for me. It is, in my opinion, super scary, with some crazy jump scares that are pretty much impossible to avoid, mainly because they are random, so you don't know when to expect them, but also some of them are very loud and in your face, but they're not cheap jump scares either. They're very well done. I also really enjoy the maps in this game. They look great, and although there's only a handful at this point, the developers have consistently updated and added new locations into the game, which I really appreciate as well. So it hasn't really gotten to the point where it's felt boring or stale. One thing that I did notice starting out in this game, it was pretty difficult as a new player. You start out with a limited amount of items, and the items are actually pretty unique because they're designed almost as if they were handmade. So you kind of have to figure out what the items are and how they work. And then if you are purchasing new items and then you die, you lose your items. So it was, like I said, pretty much a grind in the beginning. It was difficult. Obviously, if you don't have some of the better items, if you either can't afford them or if you bought them and then lost them, it's very difficult to make money in the game as a new player. So in my opinion, that made the game even better because it was, like I said, a difficult grind. The developers also put in some really fun Easter eggs, like being able to interact with items on the map using your voice. And there was actually this mysterious locked room on one map where the entire community couldn't figure out how to get in. And it was one of those falling down the rabbit hole moments for weeks, just trying to figure out clues that were supposedly hidden around the map to get into this room. And I honestly don't think anyone has even gotten in there to this day. But yeah, overall, I've played this game for 81.2 hours on Steam. Obviously, this took up a ton of my playing time for the year and was just so much fun. So that is my game of the year.
And that'll do it for our favorite games of the year. Hopefully, this was entertaining for you guys and you got a little bit of insight in 3 for us here at the Game Vault Pod. We had fun. We had a lot of great things happen in content. Looking forward to 24 here. Is going to be channel getting it. So make sure you hit subscribe, hit that notification bell, let you know when our videos are coming up. And yeah, we're over at twitch.tv/GameVaultPod, and we podcast every other Monday. And to drop this Monday, then we'll have one in 2 weeks. If you do not see a new podcast, thank you once again for joining me. And as always, we'll see you next time. Bye!